Hi everyone, I'm Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting, and today we're going to tackle a topic that's been on a lot of quilters' minds. Should you pre-wash your fabrics, or can you wash them after your project is complete? We'll also dive into some handy tools and tips to ensure that your beautiful quilts stay vibrant and bleed-free. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the debate, to pre-wash or not to pre-wash. Pre-washing your fabric can help remove any chemicals, dirt, or shrinkage that might occur after your quilt is complete. But on the other hand, some quilters prefer that crisp feel of the unwashed fabric and the slight shrinkage that can give their quilts a cozy, antique, kind of a puckered look after the first wash. Red and green fabrics in particular are known to be the most prone to bleeding, so handling these color fabrics with care is essential. Many quilters also pre-wash their fabric based on the desired look of the finished quilt. For example, if you like that crinkly, antique look to your quilt, you can use 100% cotton batting and 100% cotton fabrics. You pre-wash the fabrics so that they are pre-shrunk, and then when you wash the completed quilt, the batting will shrink, as 100% cotton batting does, giving you that lovely antique look. It is totally a personal preference. I'm going to show you, if you do decide to pre-wash your fabrics, there are a couple of tips to keep them from fraying and causing a big knotted mess in your washer and dryer. So if you look at this fabric right here, this was pre-washed. I didn't do anything special to the edge, and actually I had to cut the fraying off of it because it was just all knotted up once I took it out of the dryer. You don't want that to happen. So a simple solution to that is simply to take your fabric, use a pinking blade or pinking shears, and just run along each raw edge, a pinked edge, and then put it into the washer. Saves you all kinds of time, your fabric will not be knotted up, and you'll have a nice edge ready to cut once you're at that point in your quilt making. So that's just a little tip about pre-washing if you decide to do that. Now, if you are worried about your fabrics bleeding, especially if you're using vibrant or dark fabrics or reds and greens, color catchers really are your best friends. I usually use the Shout brand, but there are generic brands out there that work well also. These little sheets trap loose dyes in the wash and prevent them from settling on other fabrics. So here's how you can test your fabric with color catchers. Fill a bowl or sink with some water and then place a color catcher sheet in the water along with a sample of the fabric that you're testing. So I did that, and I'm going to check to see if there is any dye in the bowl. I used a white bowl because then it's easier to see. So if you take a look at what I did here, you can see that the water is already turning pink, and the color catcher is also turning pink. I'm going to take it out just so that you can see what the difference is. Now keep in mind, this is what I put in there originally, and it's a white bowl and it's just water. So I put a little piece of white batting down here so you could see, and it'll mop up a little bit of the water. But I'm going to take the color catcher out and place it on top of the batting. Now again, you can see that the water has turned pink against the white bowl, but look at the color catcher. I mean, this is definitely pink, and it was in there, usually they say about 30 minutes just to make sure that you really check it in case one's just bleeding a little bit. This one showed the color almost immediately, but you can see there is a lot of dye that is coming out of the fabric when I put it in the water. We don't want that to move over onto our quilt block pieces, especially if we have some light and some dark, red and white, green and white. Anything with a light background that color will gravitate towards could be a problem. Now keep in mind, once you've pinked the edge and you've put it in your washer, you're basically using your washer as a large tub of water. If you have 3 yards of fabric, it works a lot easier to put it in the washer, and then you can add your color catchers. Depending on the fabric and how much your test square bled, you're going to want to decide how many of these color catchers you want to put in there. Some people put 5, 6, 7 of them just to make sure that they have enough in there that's going to trap that extra color bleeding onto the color catcher. You're just going to have to try it out and see what works for you. Once you have done that, you don't need to send it through the entire wash cycle. You're not going to be using soap here, just enough that you can get that color that's in the water into the color catcher. Then once you take it out, before you dry it, you may want to check another small piece off of the fabric just to see if there's any bleed after you have done all this process with the color catchers. Same thing that I just talked about, put it in the water, put the color catcher in with the little piece of sample, and see if there's any change. If there's not, you're good to go. If there is, then you may want to use a color fixative of some sort. And Retayne is a great product for that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about using Retayne when you are trying to minimize that bleeding of your fabrics. All the instructions are on the bottle. It's what's called a color fixative. It helps lock in the dyes, prevents them from bleeding in the wash. This is especially useful for washing quilts that you know have fabrics that bleed. So here's how you use it. You fill up your washing machine with enough water for the quilt or for the fabric, and then you add Retayne to the water by following the instructions. It tells you basically how many yards, how much Retayne. Add your quilt or your fabric and then let it soak for the recommended time on the bottle. Rinse thoroughly, and then you're going to dry as usual. So what happens if you've already washed your quilt and you notice that some colors have bled? Don't worry, all is not lost. I did have that issue. One thing that I did not do, the mistake I made, I didn't check my wet quilt for bleeding before I put it in the dryer. That was a mistake because now basically the bleeding on my quilt is set in and I'm not going to easily be able to get it out. So you can see I have bleeding right here, the red fabric, and also on my green fabric. I also had more bleeding. And you know, this was not cheap fabric. Some people will say, oh, if you buy cheap fabric, then that's going to bleed more than others. No, this was good quality fabric, but it can still happen, which means there is no fabric that's immune from being checked. If you want to make sure you've got a red or a green, prime offenders, but maybe some of those vibrant colors need to be checked as well. But as you can see, I waited too long. I dried it, and now I'm afraid to do anything with it that's going to ruin it even more. And it's a beautiful quilt. It doesn't show from far away, but I can see it, and it bothers me. And I'm sure if you have that issue, it bothers you as well. Now, there are actually some remedies just in case you catch this before you dry it. One is rewash the quilt immediately and use several color catchers. I've even heard people say that they use a whole box of them to put it in there and make sure. Whatever it takes, they're not that expensive. You want to make sure that you actually remove all of that dye from your quilt, and this is going to draw that dye out. The next thing is make sure that you check the quilt and the color catchers after the wash, as I said, and then repeat if necessary. So you'll be able to look on here and see, oh, I still got some bleeding on there. Put it back in and try it again. That's one of the ways that you can do that. You're going to want to use cold water and a gentle cycle. Don't put it in hot water and don't send it through the entire wash cycle. Just enough to get that color out of there. If the bleeding continues, it can still keep going. If that continues to happen, there are other products on the market. I don't have any experience with those, so I can't recommend them. You're going to have to do a little research on that and see if they work with yours. One's called Carbona. It's a color run remover. Supposedly it works really well to get those colors that have bled out of the lighter fabrics. It works on stains too. But what you need to do is see if it's going to work on your particular quilt. So there are so many different ways that bleeding can happen, and I'm not able to give you an exact remedy for what you're doing, but hopefully you can use these options. Now, did you realize that storing your fabrics can also minimize color bleeding? I had no idea. So here's a few tips that will help you. Store your fabrics in a cool, dry place away from sunlight to prevent fading and color changes. That's kind of obvious, but sometimes we don't realize it. Keep your fabrics in breathable containers to avoid moisture buildup. That can cause dyes to bleed. Also, consider pre-washing your fabrics before you're storing them, especially if you think they might bleed. Red and green are, again, the big offenders. I hope these tips help you to keep your quilts looking just as beautiful forever. Remember, whether you choose to pre-wash or not, Using tools like color catchers and Retayne really can make a huge difference. So happy quilting, everyone. As always, don't forget to like, to subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more quilting tips and tutorials. And I will see you next time. I'm always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry.